Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The clock on my nightstand blinked 11:47 p.m. as I heard the front door creak open. Lisa was home late again. I rolled over, feigning sleep as her footsteps padded up the stairs. "John, are you awake?" she whispered, slipping into our bedroom. I grunted in response, keeping my eyes closed. The rustle of clothing told me she was changing for bed. "Sorry I'm so late," Lisa said softly. "Work's been crazy lately." I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. This was the third time this week she'd come home after 11. As she slid under the covers, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne. The next morning, I stumbled into the kitchen to find my sister Nancy already there, sipping coffee. She was visiting for the weekend, a welcome distraction from my growing suspicions. "Morning, John," Nancy chirped. Lisa left early for work. Said she had a big presentation. I poured myself a cup of coffee, frowning. "On a Saturday?" Nancy raised an eyebrow. "That's what she said. Everything okay between you two?" I sighed, slumping into a chair. "I don't know, Nance. She's been working late a lot. Always has some excuse." "Have you talked to her about it?" "Not yet. I keep telling myself I'm being paranoid." Nancy set down her mug, leaning forward. "John, I hate to say this, but I've noticed some things too. The way she's always on her phone, how she gets all dressed up for work meetings. It doesn't add up." My stomach clenched. Hearing my concerns echoed by Nancy made them feel more real. "What are you saying?" I think Lisa might be seeing someone else." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to deny it, to defend Lisa, but deep down, I knew Nancy might be right. "What should I do?" I asked, hating how lost I sounded. Nancy reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Pay attention. Look for patterns, inconsistencies. If something doesn't feel right, trust your gut." Over the next few days, I found myself watching Lisa more closely. I noticed how she'd step out to take phone calls, speaking in hushed tones, how she'd come home with her hair and makeup flawless, despite claiming to have been at the office all day. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I decided to test the waters. "How about we go out for dinner tomorrow night?" I suggested casually. "That new Italian place downtown looks good." Lisa's eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. "Oh, I can't tomorrow. I have a client meeting. Maybe next week?" I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Sure, no problem. What client is it?" "Just a potential new account," she said vaguely, suddenly very interested in her phone. "Nothing exciting." I watched as she typed out a message, angling the screen away from me. My heart sank. How had we gotten here? When had secrets and lies become the norm in our marriage? That night, as Lisa slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. I thought back to our wedding day, how happy and in love we'd been. Now, less than 5 years later, I was considering hiring a private investigator to spy on my wife. The next morning, I cornered Nancy in the kitchen before she left. "You're right," I said quietly. "Something's going on with Lisa. I need to find out what." Nancy's face fell. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm going to get proof. One way or another, I'm going to find out the truth." As Nancy hugged me goodbye, I felt a mix of determination and dread. Whatever happened next would change everything. But I had to know. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The nondescript office building loomed before me as I parked my car. My palms were sweaty as I grabbed the folder of evidence I'd compiled over the past week. It wasn't much, just a list of dates and times when Lisa had been unaccounted for, along with a few suspicious text messages I'd glimpsed on her phone. I took a deep breath and entered the building, making my way to Suite 305. The frosted glass door read, "Hawkeye Investigations." This was it. A bell chimed as I opened the door. A gruff-looking man in his 50s looked up from behind a cluttered desk. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I hope so," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you Mr. Hawkins?" He nodded. "That's me. What can I do for you, Mr. John Carlson. I think my wife is having an affair." Hawkins' expression softened slightly. I see. Have a seat, John. Tell me what's going on. I sank into the chair across from him, feeling both relieved and terrified to finally say the words out loud. As I recounted Lisa's suspicious behavior, the late nights, and unexplained absences, Hawkins listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. All right, John. Based on what you've told me, I think we have enough to start an investigation. But I need to ask, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start digging, there's no going back. I nodded firmly. I'm sure. I need to know the truth. Okay then, here's what I propose. We'll start with traditional surveillance, following your wife, documenting her movements. But I also want to try something a little more creative. My curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Hawkins pulled out a small device from his desk drawer. It looked like a miniature helicopter. This is a high-tech drone equipped with a camera. It's small, quiet, and can capture high-quality video from a distance. If your wife is meeting someone, this little guy can get us the footage we need without risking detection. I stared at the drone, a mix of fascination and unease washing over me. Is that legal? In public spaces, yes, Hawkins assured me. We won't be using it to peek in windows or anything like that. Just to monitor outdoor meetings or entries into hotels, that sort of thing. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. Over the next week, I lived in a state of constant anxiety. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, expecting news from Hawkins. Lisa seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil, continuing her pattern of late nights and vague excuses. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, I got the call I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. John, it's Hawkins. We've got something. Can you come to the office? My heart pounded as I made my way back to Hawkeye Investigations. Hawkins greeted me with a grim expression. Have a seat, John. I'm afraid I have some bad news. He turned his computer monitor towards me and hit play on a video file. The footage was crystal clear, obviously taken from the drone. I watched in horror as Lisa emerged from her car in the parking lot of the Hyatt downtown. A moment later, a tall, dark-haired man approached her. They embraced, kissed passionately, then walked hand in hand into the hotel. That was taken yesterday afternoon, Hawkins said softly. The timestamp is in the corner. They were in there for about 2 hours. I felt like I was going to be sick. Do you know who he is? Hawkins nodded, pulling out a file. His name is Alex Daniels. He works at a law firm downtown. Not the same one as your wife, but they likely met through professional circles. I've got his home address, work details, the whole 9 yards. I stared at the photo of Alex, memorizing every detail of the man who had destroyed my marriage. What now? I asked, my voice hollow. That's up to you, John. You've got solid evidence of the affair. You could confront your wife, file for divorce, or we could dig deeper, gather more evidence if you're thinking of taking legal action. I thought about Lisa, about the life we'd built together, about the future we'd planned. All of it felt like ashes now. I need time to think, I said finally. Can I get copies of everything you found? Hawkins nodded, handing me a USB drive. It's all here. Video footage, photos, background on Alex. Take your time, John. This isn't an easy thing to process. As I left the office, clutching the USB drive like a lifeline, I felt numb. Part of me wanted to rush home, confront Lisa, and demand answers. But another part, a colder, more calculating part, whispered that I needed to be smart about this. I needed a plan. I drove to a nearby park, needing fresh air and space to think. As I sat on a bench, staring at nothing, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet park. Love. What a joke. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The pain and betrayal crystallized into a cold, sharp resolve. Lisa thought she was so clever, thought she could play me for a fool. Well, two could play at that game. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Nancy? It's John. I need your help. It's time to make a plan. Nancy's face was a mixture of shock and anger as she watched the drone footage on my laptop. We were sitting in my home office, the door locked to ensure privacy. That lying, cheating. Nancy trailed off, shaking her head in disgust. I'm so sorry, John. What are you going to do? I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly calm. I'm going to destroy them both. Nancy's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not just going to walk away from this. Lisa and Alex think they're so smart, sneaking around behind my back. They have no idea what's coming. John, I know you're hurt, but... I cut her off. No, Nancy. This isn't just about being hurt. This is about justice. About consequences. They chose to blow up our lives? Fine. But I'm going to make sure they go down in flames too. Nancy looked uncertain. What exactly are you planning? I pulled out a notepad, already filled with ideas and plans. First things first, I need to talk to a divorce attorney. In this state, adultery can impact the settlement. I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row before I make any moves. Okay, that makes sense, Nancy nodded. What else? I need more evidence. The drone footage is great, but I want to build an ironclad case. Texts, emails, credit card statements, anything that proves the affair and shows how long it's been going on. Nancy frowned. How are you going to get all that? I smirked. I've got a guy, an IT specialist who owes me a favor. He can help me access Lisa's phone and computer data. John, is that legal? I shrugged. Probably not entirely. But at this point, I don't care. They didn't play by the rules. Why should I? Nancy looked uncomfortable, but didn't argue further. What about Alex? Are you going to confront him? Oh, I have special plans for Alex, I said, a cold smile spreading across my face. By the time I'm done, he'll wish he'd never laid eyes on Lisa. We spent the next few hours outlining my plan of attack. Nancy, despite her initial reservations, got more invested as we went along. By the time she left that evening, we had a solid strategy in place. The next day, I met with divorce attorney Sarah Goldstein. Her office was sleek and modern, a testament to her success in the cutthroat world of family law. So, Mr. Carlson, Sarah said, looking over the evidence I'd brought, you have solid proof of your wife's infidelity. In this state, that can definitely work in your favor during divorce proceedings. I leaned forward. How so? Sarah's eyes gleamed. Well, for starters, it can impact alimony. The court tends to be less sympathetic to a cheating spouse when it comes to financial support. It can also influence property division. With the right strategy, we could potentially get you a more favorable split of assets. And what about Lisa's lover? Can we go after him too? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Legally, our focus is on your wife. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. There are ways to make life difficult for the other man, if that's something you're interested in pursuing. I nodded grimly. Oh, I'm very interested. We spent the next hour discussing strategy, with Sarah outlining the legal process and advising me on how to proceed. By the time I left her office, I felt more confident than ever in my plan. My next stop was to see my old college roommate, Mike Chen. He now ran a successful IT security firm, and I knew he had the skills I needed. Jesus, John, Mike said, shaking his head as I explained the situation. I'm so sorry, man. That's rough. Thanks, Mike. But I didn't come here for sympathy. I need your help. Mike's expression turned serious. What do you need? I need access to Lisa's digital life. Emails, texts, location data, everything. Mike whistled low. That's not exactly above board, John. We're talking about some serious privacy violations here. I met his gaze steadily. I know, but I also know you can do it without leaving a trace. Please, Mike. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, I'll help you. But John, you've got to be careful with this stuff. If anyone finds out, they won't, I assured him. I'll be discreet. Over the next few days, I threw myself into gathering and organizing evidence. Mike came through with a treasure trove of digital information, intimate texts between Lisa and Alex, emails planning their rendezvous, even location data showing all the times Lisa had lied about her whereabouts. I created a detailed timeline of the affair, cross-referencing it with our bank statements and credit card bills. It was like putting together a twisted puzzle, each piece revealing more of the sordid picture. As I worked, I felt myself changing. The pain and shock were still there, but they were overshadowed by a cold, calculating determination. I was no longer just John, the betrayed husband. I was becoming something else, an avenging force, methodically planning the downfall of those who had wronged me. One evening, as I sat in my office surrounded by evidence of my wife's betrayal, I heard the front door open. Lisa's voice called out, "John, are you home?" I quickly locked away the incriminating files and plastered on a neutral expression. "In the office, honey." Lisa appeared in the doorway, looking tired but smiling. "Hey you, have you eaten? I was thinking we could order in." I stood up, walking over to her. For a moment, looking at her familiar face, I felt a pang of the love we once shared. But then I remembered the drone footage, the texts, the lies, and my resolve hardened. "Sure," I said, kissing her cheek. "Thai food sound good?" As Lisa nodded and went to find the takeout menu, I watched her go, my mind racing. Soon, I thought. Soon, she'll know what it feels like to have her whole world come crashing down. I picked up my phone, sending a quick text to Sarah, my lawyer. "Everything's in place. Let's move forward with filing the divorce papers." Sarah's response came moments later. "Understood. I'll have them ready by Monday." "Are you sure about this, John?" I typed back without hesitation. "Absolutely. It's time to end this charade." As I put my phone away, I heard Lisa humming in the kitchen, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break over her head. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The leather chair creaked as I leaned forward in Sarah Goldstein's office, my hands clasped tightly on her polished desk. "So, we're really doing this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "The divorce papers are ready, John. Once we file, there's no going back. Are you absolutely sure this is what you want?" I took a deep breath, thinking of Lisa's betrayal, of Alex's smug face in the drone footage. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. "All right then," Sarah said, sliding a thick stack of documents towards me. "Let's go through these one last time." For the next hour, we pored over the divorce papers, Sarah explaining each section in detail. "Now, given the evidence of adultery," Sarah said, tapping a particular paragraph, "we're pushing for a more favorable division of assets. The house, the savings accounts, most of them should go to you." I nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. "Good. What about alimony?" Sarah's lips curled into a small smile. "With the proof we have, it's unlikely Lisa will be awarded much, if any. The judge tends to be less sympathetic to cheating spouses." "Perfect," I said, then hesitated. "Sarah, there's one more thing I want to discuss." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The serving of the divorce papers. I want to make sure Lisa receives them at a specific time and place." Sarah frowned. "John, we typically use a professional process server to handle that. It's more reliable and—" I cut her off. "I know, but this is important to me. I want her to be served during her company's annual gala next week." "That's unusually specific," Sarah said slowly. "May I ask why?" I met her gaze steadily. "Because I want her to feel the same public humiliation she's put me through. I want her perfect little world to come crashing down around her, just like mine did." Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying me. Finally, she sighed. "I can't say I approve of the motivation, John, but legally, as long as the papers are served correctly, the when and where doesn't matter. If this is really what you want—" "It is," I said firmly. "Very well," Sarah nodded. "I'll make the arrangements. Now, let's finish going over these documents." As I left Sarah's office an hour later, divorce papers filed and plans in motion, I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The first domino was about to fall. I pulled out my phone, dialing Nancy's number. "Hey, John," she answered on the second ring. "How did it go with the lawyer?" "It's done," I said, climbing into my car. "The papers are filed. Lisa will be served next week at her company gala." Nancy let out a low whistle. "Wow, that's really happening, huh? How are you feeling?" I paused, considering. Honestly, I feel powerful. For the first time since I found out about the affair, I feel like I'm in control. Just be careful, okay? Nancy's voice was tinged with concern. I know Lisa hurt you, but this revenge path you're on, I'm worried about you, John. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I appreciate your concern, Nance, but I know what I'm doing. Lisa and Alex made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. After hanging up with Nancy, I drove to a small cafe across town. As I sipped my coffee, I pulled out my laptop, logging into the anonymous email account I'd set up. It was time to set the next phase of my plan in motion. I carefully composed an email to Alex's boss, attaching select pieces of evidence of the affair. As I hit send, I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. By this time tomorrow, Alex's comfortable life would be in shambles. Let the games begin, I thought, closing my laptop with a snap. The next morning, I woke early, anticipation thrumming through my veins. I knew it wouldn't be long before the bomb I dropped on Alex's workplace exploded. As I sipped my coffee, my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from my contact at Alex's firm, a paralegal I'd befriended during a case last year. Shit's hitting the fan here, the message read. Boss called emergency meeting. Alex looks like he's seen a ghost. I smiled into my mug. Keep me posted, I texted back. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Mike Chen, my IT specialist friend. John, man, you better turn on the news, Mike said without preamble. I frowned, reaching for the remote. What channel? Any of them. It's all over. I flipped to a local news station, and my eyes widened. There, splashed across the screen, was a picture of Alex's law firm, with the headline, "Prominent Attorney Suspended Amid Scandal." The perky news anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, Alexander Daniels, a rising star at Morris & Brecht Law, has been suspended pending an internal investigation. Sources close to the firm claim Daniels was caught engaging in an extramarital affair with a client's wife, violating several ethical codes. I muted the TV, a slow smile spreading across my face. Mike, you're a genius. How did you leak it to the press so fast? Mike chuckled nervously. I may have called in a few favors. But John, this is getting big. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Absolutely, I said firmly. Thanks for your help, Mike. I owe you one. After hanging up, I sat back, savoring the moment. Phase 2 was unfolding beautifully, but I wasn't done yet. I picked up my regular phone, dialing Lisa's number. It went straight to voicemail. Hey, honey, I said, injecting false cheer into my voice. Just saw something weird on the news about that law firm you sometimes work with. Everything okay? Give me a call when you can. I hung up, imagining Lisa's panic as she realized her carefully constructed house of lies was beginning to crumble. Later that afternoon, my burner phone buzzed again. It was another text from my contact at Alex's firm. Alex has been escorted out. Security took his laptop and phone. Rumors flying everywhere. I texted back, any official statement from the partners? The response came quickly, nothing yet. But word is they're distancing themselves fast. Alex is toxic now. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Alex's career was in tatters, his reputation destroyed. And the best part? He had no idea who was behind it all. My phone rang again. This time, it was Lisa. I took a deep breath, schooling my features into a neutral expression before answering. Hey, babe, did you get my message? John, Lisa's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Have you been watching the news? I feigned confusion. Just bits and pieces. Something about a scandal at a law firm? Why? What's going on? It's Alex, Lisa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They're saying he had an affair with a client's wife. He's been suspended and— Wait, I interrupted, letting a note of suspicion creep into my tone. Alex? Isn't that the guy you sometimes work with on cases? There was a long pause. Yes, Lisa finally said. But John, I swear, I had no idea about any of this. I'm as shocked as you are. I bit back a bitter laugh. Oh, the irony. Wow, I said instead. That's really something. Are you okay? This must be pretty stressful for you, given your professional connection. I'm fine, Lisa said quickly. Too quickly. Listen, I might be home late tonight. Lots to deal with at the office because of this mess. Of course, I said smoothly. Don't worry about me. Take care of what you need to. After hanging up, I allowed myself a moment of pure, vindictive pleasure. Lisa was scrambling, her carefully constructed world of lies beginning to unravel. And the best was yet to come. I picked up my burner phone again, sending a text to Sarah, my divorce attorney. Everything's on track. Proceed with serving the papers as planned. Sarah's response was immediate. Understood. Process server is briefed and ready for the gala tomorrow night. I smiled, imagining the scene that would unfold. Lisa, dressed up and playing the part of the successful, happily married woman, only to have her charade shattered in front of all her colleagues. As the day wore on, I monitored the fallout from Alex's suspension. Social media was buzzing with speculation and gossip. Several news outlets had picked up the story, each adding their own sensationalist spin. By evening, Alex's name was trending on Twitter. I scrolled through the tweets, each one a dagger to his reputation. Always knew there was something slimy about that Daniels guy. Hashtag lawyers gone wild. So much for professional ethics. Hope they disbar him. Hashtag Alex Daniels scandal. Wonder who the mystery woman is. Her poor husband. Hashtag homewrecker alert. I chuckled darkly at that last one. If only they knew. As night fell, I poured myself a glass of scotch, raising it in a mock toast to the empty room. Here's to you, Alex, I murmured. Hope it was worth it. Tomorrow, the final act would begin. And by the time it was over, both Lisa and Alex would learn the true meaning of consequences. The day of Lisa's company gala arrived, and with it, a sense of electric anticipation. I spent the morning carefully curating the digital bomb I was about to drop. Seated at my computer, I sifted through the mountain of evidence I'd collected. Intimate text messages, incriminating emails, location data proving Lisa's lies. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of her reputation. I'd created several anonymous social media accounts in preparation for this moment. As I began posting, a cold satisfaction settled in my chest. On Facebook, spotted Lisa Carlson, supposedly happily married, sneaking into the Hyatt with mystery man. TSK, TSK. Hashtag cheating wife. On Twitter. Ever wonder where your lawyer's really spending their billable hours? Ask Lisa Carlson and Alex Daniels. Hashtag lawyer love affair. On a local community forum, warning, Alex Daniels and Lisa Carlson spotted around town. Watch out, they might be coming for your spouse next. Hashtag homewrecker alert. With each post, I attached carefully selected images and snippets of messages, ensuring they were just salacious enough to go viral without crossing any legal lines. As I worked, my phone buzzed. It was Nancy. John, are you really going through with this? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Hello to you too, Nancy. And yes, I am. But John, spreading all this online, it seems so cruel, so public. I felt a flare of anger. And what Lisa did to me wasn't cruel, wasn't public. She humiliated me, Nancy, made me a laughingstock. Now it's her turn. Nancy was quiet for a moment. I understand you're hurt, John, but this revenge, I'm worried it's changing you. The brother I know wouldn't do this. Her words stung, but I pushed the feeling aside. Maybe that brother was too naive, too trusting. I'm not that man anymore, Nancy, and I'm not going to apologize for it. After hanging up, I turned back to my computer, doubling down on my efforts. By mid-afternoon, the posts were gaining traction. Comments and shares were pouring in, each one spreading the story further. At 6 p.m., my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from the process server I'd hired. In position at the gala. Target sighted. Proceeding as planned. I took a deep breath, imagining the scene about to unfold. Lisa, dressed to the nines, schmoozing with colleagues, blissfully unaware of the bomb about to drop. An hour later, my regular phone rang. It was Lisa. I let it go to voicemail, curious to hear what she'd say. Her voice, when it came, was shaky and frantic. John? John, please pick up. Something's happened. I need you. Please call me back. I smiled grimly, deleting the message without a second thought. As the evening wore on, my social media campaign reached a fever pitch. Hashtag Lisa Carlson affair was trending locally. The comments ranged from shocked disbelief to vicious glee at the scandal. Around 10 p.m., my burner phone buzzed again. This time, it was a series of texts from my contact at Lisa's firm. Holy shit, you won't believe what just happened. Lisa got served divorce papers. In the middle of her speech, place went dead silent. Then she started crying and ran out. Now everyone's on their phones, seeing all the posts. It's a madhouse here. I leaned back, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Phase 3, complete. Just then, there was a pounding at my front door. I tensed, then relaxed as I heard a familiar voice. John, I know you're in there. Open up. It was Alex. I smiled coldly, walking to the door and throwing it open. Alex stood there, his usually impeccable appearance in disarray. His eyes were wild, his fists clenched at his sides. You, he snarled. You did this. You ruined everything. I leaned against the doorframe, affecting a casual pose. I have no idea what you're talking about, Alex, but you look upset. Woman troubles? He lunged forward, grabbing my shirt. Don't play dumb. The suspension, the social media posts, Lisa getting served at the gala. It was all you. I looked pointedly at his hand on my shirt, then back at his face. I'd be very careful about your next move, Alex. Assaulting me won't look good on top of everything else, will it? He released me, stepping back. Why? He demanded. Why go to all this trouble? I straightened, all pretense of casualness dropping away. Because you and Lisa thought you could play me for a fool. Thought you could destroy my life and walk away unscathed. Consider this a lesson in consequences. Alex's face crumpled. You've ruined us. My career, Lisa's reputation, it's all gone. I shrugged, unmoved. You both made your choices. Now you get to live with them. I'd suggest you leave now, Alex, before I call the police and add trespassing to your growing list of problems. As Alex turned to go, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite regret, but perhaps a realization of the magnitude of what I'd done. I pushed the feeling aside. It was too late for second thoughts now. I closed the door, leaning against it as I heard Alex's car start up and drive away. It was done. My revenge was complete. As I walked back to my study, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Sarah, my lawyer. Just got word the divorce papers were successfully served. You okay? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I'm fine. It's finally over. But as I sat in the quiet of my study, surrounded by the digital remnants of my revenge plot, I couldn't help but wonder. Now that it was over, where did I go from here? The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to countless battles fought within its walls. Today, it would bear witness to mine. I straightened my tie, glancing at Sarah, my divorce attorney, as we climbed the steps. You ready for this, John? Sarah asked, her briefcase swinging at her side. I nodded, a grim smile playing on my lips. I've been ready for months. Let's finish this. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Lisa for the first time since serving her the divorce papers. She sat at the defendant's table, her usual polished appearance marred by dark circles under her eyes and a slight tremor in her hands. Alex sat behind her, his face a mask of worry. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd once loved. Then her gaze hardened, and she looked away. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The Honorable Judge Caroline Hendricks presiding. As we all stood, Sarah leaned in close. Remember, let me do the talking unless the judge directly addresses you. We've got this. I nodded, taking my seat as Judge Hendricks began the proceedings. We're here today for the divorce case of John Carlson versus Lisa Carlson, the judge stated, her voice crisp and authoritative. I understand the plaintiff is citing adultery as grounds for divorce. Is that correct, Mrs. Goldstein? Sarah stood. Yes, Your Honor. And we have substantial evidence to support this claim. Lisa's attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, jumped in. Your Honor, My client acknowledges her indiscretion but contends that Mr. Carlson's subsequent actions constitute a form of harassment and Judge Hendricks held up a hand, silencing her. We'll get to that, Mrs. Patel. For now, let's review the evidence of adultery. For the next hour, I watched as Sarah methodically presented our case. The drone footage, the text messages, the credit card statements all laid bare for the court to see. With each piece of evidence, Lisa seemed to shrink further into her chair. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she stood on shaky legs. Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake. I know that. But what John has done since finding out, the public humiliation, the destruction of my career and Alex's, it's beyond cruel. I felt a flare of anger at her words. Before I could stop myself, I spoke up. Cruel? You want to talk about cruel, Lisa? How about lying to my face for months? How about making me look like a fool in front of everyone we know? Mr. Carlson, Judge Hendricks warned, please refrain from speaking out of turn. I nodded, chastened but still seething. My apologies, Your Honor. The judge turned back to Lisa. Mrs. Carlson, while I sympathize with your current situation, the evidence of your infidelity is overwhelming. And unfortunately for you, we are in a fault divorce state. Your actions will have consequences in terms of the settlement. Lisa's face crumpled, and she sank back into her chair. Her attorney stood, ready to argue, but Judge Hendricks waved her off. Save your breath, Mrs. Patel. I've made my decision. Given the circumstances, I'm awarding Mr. Carlson the house and the majority of the shared savings accounts. Mrs. Carlson, you'll be responsible for your own legal fees, and no alimony will be awarded. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Sarah squeezed my arm in silent congratulation. As the judge continued outlining the terms of the divorce, I glanced over at Alex. He sat there, a look of utter defeat on his face. Good, I thought. It's about time he realized the cost of his actions. Just as the judge was about to adjourn, Sarah stood up. Your Honor, there's one more matter we'd like to address. My client would like to file a restraining order against Mr. Alex Daniels. Alex's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. What? Why? Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow. On what grounds, Mrs. Goldstein? Sarah pulled out another file. Your Honor, we have evidence of Mr. Daniels making threatening statements towards my client, as well as attempting to enter his property without permission. I remembered Alex's drunken visit to my house, his angry texts and voicemails, all carefully documented, all part of my plan. The judge reviewed the evidence, her expression growing stern. I see. Mr. Daniels approached the bench. Alex stumbled forward, his face pale. Your Honor, I was upset. I never meant to. Save it, Mr. Daniels. Judge Hendricks cut him off. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Carlson at all times. Do you understand? Alex nodded numbly, shuffling back to his seat. Lisa reached out to touch his arm, but he shrugged her off. As the judge brought down her gavel, finalizing the divorce and the restraining order, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was done. I'd won. Outside the courtroom, Sarah shook my hand, a broad smile on her face. Congratulations, John. It couldn't have gone better if we'd scripted it ourselves. I nodded, watching as Lisa and Alex huddled with their attorney further down the hall. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. As I turned to leave, I heard Lisa call out, John, wait. I paused, considering ignoring her, but curiosity won out. I turned back. What is it, Lisa? She stood there, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. I looked at her, this woman I'd once loved more than anything in the world. Now, all I felt was a cold emptiness. You're right, Lisa. It doesn't change anything. Goodbye. As I walked away, leaving my old life behind, I felt a strange mix of triumph and hollowness. I'd won the battle, but at what cost? The thought nagged at me as I left the courthouse, stepping into the bright sunlight of a new chapter in my life. Weeks passed, and I found myself unable to let go of my obsession with Lisa and Alex's downfall. I'd won, yes, but I needed to see the full extent of their ruin. One rainy afternoon, I drove to the seedier part of town, where I knew Lisa had been forced to relocate. The apartment building was a far cry from our spacious suburban home, its paint peeling and gutters overflowing. I parked across the street, watching as Lisa trudged up the steps, laden with grocery bags. She looked different, smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweater. As if sensing my presence, she glanced up, her eyes meeting mine through the car window. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she shook her head and disappeared into the building. My phone buzzed. It was Nancy. "John? Where are you? I've been trying to reach you all day." I sighed, starting the car. "I'm just running some errands." "What's up?" Nancy's voice was tight with concern. "I'm worried about you, John. This obsession with Lisa and Alex, it's not healthy. Have you thought about talking to someone?" I pulled away from the curb, heading towards downtown. "I'm fine, Nancy. I'm just tying up loose ends." "Loose ends? John, the divorce is final. It's over. You need to move on." I felt a flare of irritation. "I'll move on when I'm ready. I gotta go, Nance. I'll call you later." I hung up before she could protest, focusing on the road ahead. My next stop, Alex's former workplace. The law firm of Morris and Brecht was housed in a sleek high-rise, all glass and steel. I entered the lobby, approaching the reception desk with a confident smile. "Good afternoon," I said smoothly. "I have an appointment with Mr. Brecht." The receptionist, a young man with a skeptical expression, raised an eyebrow. "Your name, sir?" "John Carlson." He tapped at his computer, then frowned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carlson, but I don't see any appointment for you today." I feigned surprise. "No? That's odd. I'm sure Mr. Brecht's assistant scheduled it. Something about discussing the Daniels situation?" At the mention of Alex's name, the receptionist's eyes widened slightly. He lowered his voice. "Oh, I see. Let me call up to Mr. Brecht's office." As he made the call, I glanced around the lobby. Alex's face used to smile down from the Rising Stars wall. Now, his photo was conspicuously absent. The receptionist hung up, looking flustered. "Mr. Brecht will see you, Mr. Carlson. 15th floor, end of the hall." I nodded my thanks, hiding a smirk as I headed for the elevators. Sometimes, a little misdirection went a long way. Mr. Brecht, a distinguished man in his 60s, stood as I entered his office. "Mr. Carlson, I must say, this is highly irregular. We don't typically discuss former employees with anyone." I took a seat across from him, maintaining an air of calm authority. "I understand, Mr. Brecht, but given the unique circumstances of Mr. Daniels' departure, I thought it prudent to follow up. For closure, you understand?" Brecht's expression softened slightly. "Ah, yes. The affair. A nasty business, that. I assume you're the wronged husband?" I nodded solemnly. "I am. I hope you understand. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to ensure that Mr. Daniels won't be in a position to repeat his mistakes." Brecht leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Well, Mr. Carlson, I can assure you that Alex Daniels no longer has any association with this firm. His actions were a gross violation of our ethical standards, not to mention a PR nightmare." "And his future in law?" I prodded gently. Brecht sighed. "Off the record? The man's radioactive. No reputable firm will touch him with a 10-foot pole. Last I heard, he was working as a paralegal at some strip mall outfit. A rather spectacular fall from grace, wouldn't you say?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Indeed. Thank you for your time, Mr. Brecht. You've been most helpful." As I left the office, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Alex's promising career, the one he'd been so proud of, was in tatters. He'd never recover from this, not fully. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Nancy. "John, please call me. I'm really worried about you." I ignored it, focusing instead on my next move. The community center was having a meeting tonight, discussing recent events in the neighborhood. I had a feeling Lisa and Alex might come up in conversation. That evening, I slipped into the back of the community center, just as the meeting was getting underway. The room was packed, filled with familiar faces from around town. "Now, on to our next item of business," the committee chair announced. We've had some concerns raised about certain individuals in our community, specifically Lisa Carlson and Alex Daniels. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I sank lower in my seat, listening intently. I don't want them around my kids, one woman spoke up. What kind of example are they setting? Another man chimed in. I heard Alex lost his job. Good riddance, I say. We don't need people like that in our neighborhood. And Lisa, an older woman added, her voice dripping with disdain, parading around like she's done nothing wrong. The nerve of some people. I listened as the conversation devolved into a litany of judgments and condemnations. Part of me reveled in it, knowing that Lisa and Alex were facing the consequences of their actions. But another part, a part one tried to ignore, felt a twinge of something. Guilt? Regret? As I left the meeting, those conflicting emotions swirled inside me. I'd achieved what I set out to do. Lisa and Alex were ruined, their lives torn apart just as they'd torn apart mine. So why didn't I feel the satisfaction I'd expected? I drove home in silence, Nancy's ignored messages weighing on my mind. As I pulled into my driveway, I realized that despite everything I'd accomplished, despite all the pain I'd caused Lisa and Alex, I didn't feel whole. I didn't feel healed. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if my quest for revenge had cost me more than I'd realized. The sound of waves crashing against the shore filled my ears as I stood on the deck of my new home. The salty air whipped around me, carrying away the last vestiges of my old life. After months of meticulous planning and ruthless execution, I'd finally done it. I'd moved to a remote coastal town, far from the chaos and pain of my past. The house, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, was everything I dreamed of. A fresh start, a clean slate. The crunch of tires on gravel pulled me from my reverie. Nancy's car pulled up, and I watched as my sister emerged, her face a mixture of awe and concern. "John," she called out, shielding her eyes from the sun. "This place is wow." I managed a small smile. "Come on up, Nance. The view's even better from here." As Nancy joined me on the deck, I could feel her studying me, trying to gauge my state of mind. "So," she said finally, "this is it, huh? Your grand escape?" I turned to face her. "It's not an escape, Nancy. It's a new beginning." Nancy sighed, leaning against the railing. "John, we need to talk about what happened. About what you did." I felt a familiar surge of defensiveness. "What I did? You mean getting justice? Making sure Lisa and Alex paid for what they did to me? Is that what you call it?" Nancy's voice was soft, but her words cut deep. "Justice? Because from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like revenge." I turned away, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean. "You don't understand, Nancy. You weren't there. You didn't feel the humiliation, the betrayal." "You're right," Nancy interrupted. "I wasn't there. But I'm here now, and I'm watching my brother throw away everything he used to believe in. The John the First knew would never have gone to such extremes." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with truth I wasn't ready to face. "They deserved it," I said, but even to my own ears, the words sounded hollow. Nancy placed a hand on my arm. "Did they, John? Did they deserve to have their entire lives destroyed? Their reputations ruined? To be ostracized from their community?" I pulled away from her touch. "They made their choices, Nancy. They knew the risks." "And what about your choices, John?" Nancy pressed. "What about the risks you took? The lines you crossed?" I whirled to face her. "What do you want from me, Nancy? An apology? Remorse? Because I'm not sorry. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." Nancy's eyes filled with tears. "Would you? Really? Look me in the eye and tell me that this crusade of yours has made you happy, that you feel whole again." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I knew she was right. The victory I'd achieved felt hollow, the satisfaction fleeting. "I don't know how to let it go," I admitted quietly. "The anger, the bitterness, it's all I have left." Nancy's expression softened. "No, John, it's not all you have left. You have me. You have this beautiful new home, this chance at a fresh start, but you have to be willing to take it." We stood in silence for a long moment, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. Finally, I spoke. I don't know if I can forgive them, Nancy. I don't know if I want to. I'm not asking you to forgive them, Nancy said gently. I'm asking you to forgive yourself, to let go of this anger before it consumes you completely. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw the love and concern shining in her eyes. And for the first time in months, I felt something crack inside me. I don't know how to do that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been angry for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. Nancy wrapped her arms around me, and I found myself leaning into her embrace. It's a process, John. It won't happen overnight. But you've taken the first step by admitting it. We stood there for a while, the ocean breeze whipping around us. Finally, I pulled back, wiping my eyes. So, what now? I asked, feeling lost. Nancy smiled softly. Now, you show me around this amazing new house of yours. And maybe we talk about getting you some help. A therapist, maybe? I nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe. But first, let me give you the grand tour. As we walked through the house, I found myself opening up more to Nancy. We talked about the divorce, about the aftermath, about the hollowness I'd been feeling despite my supposed victory. You know, Nancy said as we settled in the living room with cups of coffee, it's okay to admit that what you did was wrong, even if you felt justified at the time. I stared into my cup, watching the steam rise. I know. It's just, I was so hurt, so angry. I wanted them to feel what I felt. And did it work? Nancy asked gently. Did hurting them heal your pain? I shook my head, feeling a weight lift as I finally admitted the truth. No. If anything, it made it worse. I thought I'd feel better once they were ruined, but I just feel empty. Nancy reached out, squeezing my hand. That's because revenge doesn't heal wounds, John. It just creates new ones. We sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the waves a soothing backdrop to our conversation. I think I need help, Nancy. I finally admitted. I don't want to be this person anymore. Nancy's face lit up with a mix of relief and hope. That's the brother I know. And I'll be here every step of the way, okay? As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ocean, Nancy and I stood on the deck once more. It really is beautiful here, Nancy said, taking in the view. A perfect place for a fresh start. I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Yeah, it is. And I'm going to make the most of it. Nancy turned to me, her expression serious. Promise me something, John? What's that? Promise me you'll let go of the past. That you'll focus on healing yourself instead of hurting others. I took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. The future stretched before me, unknown but full of possibility. I promise, Nancy. It won't be easy, but I promise to try. As Nancy prepared to leave, she hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, John. This is the first day of your new life. Make it count. I watched as she drove away, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me still wanted to cling to the anger and resentment that had driven me for so long. But another part, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, was ready to embrace this new beginning. Walking back into the house, I paused by the boxes of evidence I'd brought with me, a tangible reminder of my quest for revenge. With a decisive move, I picked them up and carried them outside to the fire pit on the beach. As I watched the papers and photos curl and blacken in the flames, I felt a sense of release. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. I stood there, watching as the last of the evidence turned to ash, carried away by the ocean breeze. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a therapist. Tomorrow, I'd begin the hard work of rebuilding myself, of becoming the man I used to be before betrayal and revenge consumed me. But for now, I simply stood there, breathing in the salty air, listening to the rhythm of the waves. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. As darkness fell, I turned back to my new home. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it, ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever the future might hold. I paused at the doorway, taking one last look at the starlit ocean. Goodbye, old John, I whispered. Hello, New beginnings. With that, I stepped inside, closing the door on my past and opening it to a future full of possibility and hope. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.